This week's Dicebreaker podcast is sponsored by Voodoo Ranger. If you're looking for that perfect companion for a night around the table reminiscing of stories once told, crack open a Voodoo Ranger IPA and roll for sass. Check out the free virtual D&D games brought to you by Voodoo Ranger during all 9 days of PAX Online, running from September 12th through the 20th. And for beer news and occasional mediocre advice, follow at Voodoo Ranger on Twitter and Instagram. Voodoo Ranger IPA. Drink responsibly, live rangerously.
Hello and welcome back to the Dicebreaker podcast. This is episode 22. I don't know about you, but I'm feeling episode 22.
Do you have that one prepped that whole time?
No, it's just that there's always some kind of Taylor Swift lyric floating around in my head. I'm
really excited for Blink-182 next week.
Oh, God. I am Matt Jarvis. I'm the editor-in-chief of Dicebreaker, and this week I'm joined by two of the team. I'm joined by Alex Lolies from the video producer even for Dicebreaker. How are you doing, Lolies? I almost said from the video team and also video producer and just combined it into video.
I am
Alex
video.
Lolies of video.
Hi, it's me. I'm happy to be here after my week off. Yeah.
It was almost convincing. I'm happy to be here.
Insert.
I am checks notes. Happy to be here.
Yes, it's good to have you back. It's actually, so since we last recorded the podcast, you have gained a year in age, I have gained a year in age, Mian's gained a year in age and is currently off celebrating her birthday, and the website and video channel, Dicebreaker as a whole, has celebrated a year in age, turning a whole 1 year old. So happy birthday to Lolies, me and Dicebreaker.
Yay!
What are the odds?
That you guys didn't gain a year in age over 1 day. You celebrated a year in age.
Well, it feels like we did.
It takes up. I have to check a different box when I fill out things on the internet now.
Yeah, I think I'm in like the 30 to 57 year range or something horrible like that.
57? That's enormous. What kind of life range is that?
I'm an adult now, a real adult.
And of course, completing the podcast crew this week is Michael Wills Whelan. Hello, Wills. How are you doing?
I'm good.
Hello.
Thank you very much for having me on.
Excellent stuff. We are, of course, here to talk about this week's cavalcade of board game news and tabletop RPG news, as well as what we've been playing, answer some of your questions, and various other things. Oh yeah, you got to do the side to side.
Yeah,
look.
for anyone who's watching, I'm doing, because Mian's not here, somebody has to step in and do the old side to side.
That's her brand, though.
Yeah.
It's her brand.
Yeah.
That's one of those exclusive little treats for the video watchers. Along with when we hold up board games, then have to awkwardly describe what someone's doing on camera. Let's kick off by talking about what we've been playing. Let's start with Wheels. Let's go in backwards order. Wheels, what have you been playing this week?
You're probably right to start with me because I've not played a lot this week. Although we did, since the last podcast record, we have played more Cyberpunk 2020, which was good fun. Or Cyberpunk Red, sorry, not Cyberpunk 2020. Cyberpunk 2020 is the old one. Red is the new one, right?
Yes.
I know things. So look forward for that on the channel. I actually, like, the more I play of it, the more I'm really into the Cyberpunk Tabletop RPG. Like, it's actually really good fun. It might just be because Cody is a really good GM, but yeah, who knows? But that's pretty much it, to be honest. I've been doing a lot of personal project stuff, so I haven't had a lot of time to mess around with silly board games.
But yeah, I think I really enjoyed that Cyberpunk playthrough. I think, like you say, it helps that Cody Pondsmith, who's the co-designer of Red, kindly ran another game for us for PAX Online. So that'll be going live during PAX Online. September 12th, I believe, is when it's going up. But having someone that obviously works on the game and knows it inside out, he was like, oh yeah, your base stat is this for like our pre-gen characters without even looking at things. Although there is a moment in that playthrough where Cody had to reach for a rulebook because let's say one member of the team, who will remain nameless, managed to throw up something that was so unexpected that the code creator of the game had to double check something in the rulebook to see what would happen.
Basically, Cody made the mistake of thinking, surely no one would do something this stupid, and then ran an RPG with me in it.
It was very good. And for those who haven't watched our previous playthrough of Cyberpunk Red with so the Jumpstart kit, which was last year at PAX Unplugged, that is live on our YouTube channel now, and that I think is still right up there with my favourite sessions of anything I've ever played. Yeah. I was just cracking up all the way through.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that, and I was really looking forward to joining you guys for this next edition of Cody does of Cyberpunk with us, but I was off, so I didn't get to join you, unfortunately. But
we had to swap Alex's.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing it though. I'm really looking forward to seeing what happened to your characters and like how Wheels managed to ruin everything.
Yeah,
quite literally.
That statement has never been truer. All right. If that's all you've been playing, Wheels, let's move over to you, Lolies. What have you been playing during your week off, well-earned time off?
I played some of my favourite games because it was my birthday week, so it was a good time to play some of my faves. I played on Board Game Arena, which is one of my favourite like board game websites. It obviously doesn't have as much as like Tabletop Sim, for example, but it's it's got a lot of my favourite games on there, and because it's not like Tabletop Sim where you have to move everything yourself. A lot of it is like computerized. That can be really nice sometimes, just to be able to like just click a button and it does a bunch of stuff for you. So I played Can't Stop, which is one of my favorite push your luck games.
Yes.
For anyone who doesn't know, it's you've got like this track, and the tracks are different lengths, so like based on the probability of each number. So 7 is like the longest track, because with 2 dice 7 is the most likely number to come up, and 12 and 2 on the other sides, on the far sides, are like only 3 long or something, because they're very improbable to come up. So you're trying to be like the first player to gain 3 rows, I believe, by like getting to the top first, and it's a push your luck game, so your turn will take as long as you kind of want it to take, unless you go bust. It's just really exciting and silly, and it's one of those games like it doesn't take too long, so you easily like play a few rounds of it, and you just get so into it and like are just heartbroken, and yeah, it's a good one. I played Tobago also on Board Game Arena, which I've talked about few times before. If you don't know by now, go back and listen to the podcast. It's a great game that I really like.
We'll just edit it in like a clip show.
Yeah. But yeah, Tobago's on there, which is great, because I only got a copy of it like a couple of weeks ago, and before that, like the last few years, Board Game Arena was the only place that I could really play it. But like even now, it's like a bit sad, because no one seems to either know Tobago, or maybe just no one likes it, I don't know. But it's like if I try and go on and play Tobago, like no one will ever join my table.
I'm gonna Google it now, because I have absolutely no idea.
Oh really? Oh, it's a really cool game where you're like on an island and you're trying to get treasure and stuff like that.
Yeah, it sounds really good. And like Can't Stop, you taught to me and I believe like a while back.
Oh, yeah.
And since then I've taught it to multiple groups of people because I enjoyed it so much. It is one of those like, oh, this is really straightforward, but you just like once you're rolling, it's like, oh, I can just get one more, and then you absolutely biff it, and it's like, oh.
And then some other people will just keep going for ages, and you're like, how are you doing it? And they just get to the top, and you're like, how, what, like, and your just mind is blown. It's great. I played Star Realms. I played Star Realms with one of the creators of Star Realms, Starwin Castle. We had 3 games. I won the first one. He won the other 2. But we've had 4 games in total, and it's 2 each. So we're technically drawn.
Just one of those things where it's like, okay, best of 5 this time, and then the other one edges ahead. Okay, best of 7. Just the endless competition.
We're definitely gonna. He's up for playing again and seeing. Yeah, but apparently this was quite cool, because we were talking and I was saying like, oh, my win percent, because I play it on the app mostly, and it shows you your win percentage, and my win percentage has recently gone up from, it's been hovering on the 49.99 to the 50.01 percentage area for the last 3 years, but it's gone up recently to 50.57 or something, so it's gone up, or maybe it's lower than that, but it's gone up a little bit.
It sounds like you're talking about like a Call of Duty kill death ratio or something.
But I was like, you know, my win percentage is only 50%, and he was like, oh, like the top Star Realms players are between 50 and 60%. So I was like, oh, okay, I'm not too bad then.
Oh.
So that was exciting. And most excitingly, I've played D&D with Liam, my boyfriend.
Oh my god.
Yeah, so for anyone who doesn't know, which is everyone, I'm assuming, my boyfriend doesn't really play board games. He'll play a game if I'm like, let's play this game. And I usually don't pick anything that's like really hard or anything. Like I keep it pretty simple. But I said to him recently, I was like, do you want to play D&D? Because we were looking for a third player. And he was like, yeah, right. And I was like, okay. And I was like, you can play a mute character if you don't want to do like in-character talking. Because I thought like he's a very quiet guy. And I was like, you know, that might make him feel a bit more comfortable. And in the end, like, yeah, he played a half-orc monk called Finton. And he seemed to have like quite a good time, and it was really exciting. And like he got thrown straight in by like having to play a level 5 character, and it was really fun. But it was like, I just spoke to him before the podcast and I was like, why did you say yes? Because I was like, there's always like people asking about how can I get my partner to play this game or whatever. And I was like quizzing him, like, why did you say yes? And like, what did you like about it? What didn't you like about it? Did you find it like really easy to figure out? Like all these questions. He just said yes because he was up for it. So there was nothing really that I did.
I thought he was just going to say like, it was your birthday.
That's what I thought. I actually thought that's why he said it, because I was like, it's my birthday, will you play? And he said yeah. So I thought that's why he said yes, but apparently he just didn't mind. And he found it quite easy to grasp, but I did kind of give him an overview, and like I kind of just said, just look at those little numbers next to like, you know, strength and whatever, and that's like the main thing you need. Thankfully we had a very knowledgeable DM who was able to like kind of hold everyone's hands. But yeah,
nice. Is that going to be like an ongoing campaign now, or is that just a one shot?
It was a one shot. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, everyone seems to be keen to keep going. Like even Liam was like, yeah, I'll play again. But I don't know. Like it was meant to be a one shot. I don't know if we're gonna, I don't know. I kind of said like to everyone else playing, I was like, it'd be quite fun because we started at level 5. It'd be quite fun for us to go back to level 1 and like do like the pre-story and then go up to that moment where we were in the story. But it's at the end of the day, it's up to the DM, isn't it? What he's wanted to do.
That's lovely though. So Liam hadn't played like a tabletop role-playing game at all before?
No.
Oh wow.
I think the most complicated thing he'd played before that was like Quacks of Quedlinburg. Like,
wow, that's a jump.
Yeah. Like he'll play games like if I ask him to, and he usually beats me as well, which is very annoying. But yeah, his first RPG, very exciting.
Oh, excellent stuff. All right. It sounds like you've had a pretty packed week then.
Yeah, well, my birthday, you know, gotta get those games in.
If that's everything you've played, I will. I've managed to play more games. I was saying before the podcast started, probably more games in the last week than I have done in the last few months combined. I think just being able to have a few days off for my own birthday. So I played Crokinole, which is still the greatest game ever made. We accidentally over-glissed the board at one point, which was at first kind of it was too much gliss, so the discs were sticking, and then it's like it rubs in or it spreads out, and it's like, oh, now it's like ice. So you have to just the gentlest tap will send a disc across the entire board.
Just imagining you doing like a Crokinole PSA where you're like, kids, don't over-gliss your board.
Don't do gliss. So yeah. Crokinole it's still incredible. For those who don't know, Crokinole is a game. We have a video of it on the channel where you essentially just flick discs across a circular board. There's a hole in the middle. You score 20 points for the hole in the middle. Then it's 15, 10, 5. But you have to even knock your opponent's discs as well to have a legal shot. And it's just amazing. It is a game of just pure dexterity. Like, I guess skill, but also you get to the point where sometimes you just have to hope that you can thread the needle between the little posts on the board. And when you pull it off, it's unbelievably satisfying. And it has that thing of snooker, or at least how I play snooker, where you at points you'll just full blast something just as a last ditch attempt, and you can knock like 3 off if it happens to bounce the right way. It's just
when we played it at, was it PAX Unplugged or PAX East?
Yeah,
we played it a lot, and it was so funny because
East was the competition, and then
yeah.
Unplugged was when we first learned about it.
So like I remember when we were first got the disc into the hole, we'd all go crocodile.
I love how you say when we finally meet back up again, we're not going to still do that.
Yeah. I've had people that I've taught and who've seen that video like, oh, so it's called a knoll then? And it's like, no, I think that was just a silly name that we were just shouting at each other, but it's now started to spread among the people I played with because it's just, I assume it doesn't really have a name as far as I know. Just getting it in the middle is just 20 points. So, but I think calling it a knoll is much more
short
fun.
For knoll in the hole.
Knoll in the hole, yeah. So yeah, Crokinole still incredible. I played the digital version of Root, which just came out in early access, I believe, on PC through Steam. It's really good. Root is a fantastic board game anyway, but the presentation of it is really slick. So it's 3D graphics. It kind of brings the forest to life, and when you get into battles between whatever factions it may be, it does a kind of like almost like, I guess, Pokemon like split screen, like whooshing background behind an eerie bird and like a Marquis de cat,
like Advance Wars style.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then they'll tussle, like it'll be a little smoke cloud, and then one of them will. It's kind of at points a bit morbid because the smoke will clear and it's just like a bird with crossed out eyes because it's been, wrecked by a bunch of cats. But it's a really good presentation of that game. I do find that Carl Ferrin's art on the original board game, obviously amazing, but very kind of distinct pastel, 2D by nature of being a board. And it's the 3D graphics have taken that. And did you ever play any of the PS2 game, like PlayStation 2 games, where it's like Futurama, like Family Guy, whatever the Simpsons like cartoon, exactly, yeah, where it's like it looks like those characters. But it's just like they were clearly not made to be 3D in the first place, so there's like a weird look to them. I'm kind of into it, but it's just like it's a bit of a it just put me in mind of PS2 games. But yeah, Root Digital seems a very good version of a very good game. So and obviously it's a nice way to play with a full table, which has been hard for a while. For my birthday itself, I actually played Ancient Civilizations of the Inner Sea, which is one of my favourite games of last year, even though I don't think it's not one of the best games of last year, but it was one of my favourites. It's like a big sprawling like strategy game where you control civilizations from history around the Mediterranean. So you might be the Gauls, you might be the Celts, whatever it may be. And it's basically just you screwing each other over. So your civilization grows, you put down discs, and then you play a load of cards, and all the cards are like flood, plague, like pirates, barbarian.
Is there potato famine?
I don't think there's that specifically, but there's like famine in general.
Okay.
It's just it's very silly and it's very swingy because you can just team up on people and just like run them into the ground. We were playing with 3 people, so I immediately got kind of piled on by the other 2 civilizations to the point where I had like 1 city remaining, and in the end I lost by about 20 victory points, and the leader had about 29 victory points, so I didn't have many at all. But I love it. It's really silly. It's very straightforward. It's a lot more fun than it looks because it looks very dry. It's from GMT Games, who make like Twilight Struggle and a lot of like very kind of simulation-y war games. But this is just like it's the historical equivalent of someone in a toga at like a toga party, like chugging a beer from a keg. That's about as close as it gets. I mean,
history.
yeah, you can play it as like a more serious game, but really the fun of it is like just like here's a volcano, here's a biblical flood, here's it's just ridiculous.
Did you ever play History of the World?
Yeah, I really like History of the World.
History Roll's really good. It's got that similar vibe where it's like you go through the eras kind of thing, and then just big events happen because you happen to have a card that says plague on it or whatever.
Yeah, History of the World is the one where you play as like a civ for a little bit, right? And then you swap to another one, and then your old one just kind of sits on the map.
You draft who you are each era, so it's like at some point someone will be like, I'm the Roman Empire, and everyone goes, oh god. Because it's got that kind of thing where it's like, it's quite clever actually. Like it does actually map out history quite well, with even though you still have agency over what's going on. Yeah, it's good.
Yeah,
good game.
I mean, I like civilization games are among my favorites. I think I just like the feeling of like building up a civilization and gaining technology, but they can be quite dry and long. So when there's like a streamlined, even if it's a bit on the silly side and a bit unbalanced, it's good fun.
Matt, have you ever heard of a game called Tapestry?
I like Tapestry. I know there's a lot of hate for Tapestry,
I like Tapestry.
particularly among the Dicebreaker team.
No,
but
I like it. It's only Wheels who doesn't.
Well, I wouldn't say it's only Wheels.
Johnny likes it.
I meant in the worlds rather than in Dicebreaker.
With Tapestry, I just wished it was a little more thematic, because it's like you can unlock like radar dishes before you unlock writing and things like that. It's just kind of a bit all over the place, but I like Tapestry on the whole. It's like, if it was a star, I'd give it like a solid 3 stars. It's like, this plays perfectly fine. Like, it's not, the best game in the world, but I'll sit down for a game of it.
I give a lot of hate to Tapestry, but I think a lot of that comes from the price of it. It's just like such an obnoxiously expensive thing for something that's basically a 2 out of 5.
And those buildings look fine,
and it's just like it's just a bit ugly as well. Like it's not
But other than that, I'll whiz through the rest of the things I've been playing, because like I say, there's been a lot. Infinity, I continue to paint Infinity models thanks to Wills. There are now 4 of us forming an Infinity group, so we have like a Discord, and we're basically setting up a wargaming club because enough of us are getting involved in Infinity. I purchased Master of Nyarlathotep, the Call of Cthulhu campaign, which I'm going to run for my Trail of Cthulhu group, which is like a really epic, long campaign that globe-trots around solving a mystery. I believe there are some problematic elements that have been corrected in the newer versions because it dates from the 80s. I actually got the slightly older version because I'm converting it for Trail of Cthulhu, and the only conversion I could find was for the 2010 edition. So I'm hoping that a lot of that was smoothed out by that point. But there's a version from last year or the year before which is obscenely expensive. It's like 60 quid for the PDF, which seems a lot. Like it's a hefty campaign, but it's just I couldn't put the money in for that. So
you did that to me yesterday, Matt Jarvis, when you were like, "Hey, Wheels, look at this cool comic book version of Dio," and I was like, "Oh, that's cool." He's like, "Yeah, it's $100," and I'm like, "What?
I didn't price it
this to me
because I thought you'd be like, "Oh, that's interesting. Whoa, the price tag," and instead you were like, "This seems really good." So yes, the Dio comic book. And the last thing I've been playing is Cartographers on mobile, which came out recently, which I think was nominated for or won one of the Spiel des Jahres awards. It's like a tile placement game where you create a map, but it's started to absorb all my evenings while I'm laying in bed. So it's just, it's been really good. Go away, cat. Goodness. Sorry.
Was it a roll and write?
No, it's a flip and write. So each
very different.
Each round. So it's cards rather than dice. So you reveal cards and they specify the type and the shape of tiles. So they might be a village, or they might be water or farmland or forest, whatever it may be. There are 4 seasons, and a certain number of cards are revealed each season, and there are 4 scoring objectives which are randomized. And each season changes them. So the first season is A and B, then it's B and C, then C and D, then D and A. So you always have 2 objectives, but they kind of change season by season. So you might be trying to place forests along the edge of the map for the first season, and then you'll score that again, but only in the last season. And then others are like, okay, place farmland next to water, and you'll score for both, or don't place farmland next to water, like in separate clusters, or make the biggest amount of villages in the second largest cluster, or connect mountains on the map together with forests. It's really good. So there's a lot of objectives. The app, which I think is out for iOS and Android, I don't know if it's on PC, it has a kind of fully randomized mode, so random objectives, random cards. It has a mode that then will put you on the high score ranking list, which is randomized cards, but the objectives are the same for everyone in the world, and they will change week by week. And then there is a different ranked mode, which is same cards, same objectives for everyone. So it's like a really, it's a solid app in terms of just there are different options to kind of test yourself. But I've been really, really enjoying it. So yeah, that's me. That's like a lot.
That is a lot.
I look forward to next week not playing anything. So shall we move on to news?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, let's do it.
That's kind of a rhetorical question. It's more of a, we're moving on to news now. Here comes the news section. Prepare yourself. So kind of the biggest news this week is the announcement of a new D&D 5e sourcebook, Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, which is a follow-up to Xanathar's Guide to Everything from a couple of years ago. So this is a sourcebook for Dungeons & Dragons. It is a sourcebook rather than like a setting book. So it essentially adds more character options, more like items, more DM options. I think there are puzzles in there. It's not a new environment. It's not a new part of the world, and it's not a new campaign. But the big kind of thing that is being added in Cauldron of Everything is they are essentially allowing you to modify or ignore completely racial traits, which have long been a point of contention in D&D. In terms of you play a certain race and you will get certain modifiers. Many of them are problematic. They came out a few weeks or months ago, kind of acknowledging that many of the racial traits were problematic and kind of stemmed from earlier D&D, and like basically vowing that they would make steps towards fixing them. So this appears to be a step in the right direction. Alex Meehan has actually previewed it and kind of went through it and found that it's a positive sign. So you can kind of read her full thoughts on the website. But the short of it is here that you can modify traits as you wish. You can ignore them completely. So you could just make, an orc character or an elven character and have them have whatever stats you want. You don't have to abide by whatever like racial traits or modifiers they might have normally. It's written in the voice of Tasha, who is as is becoming a running theme for D&D, is a slightly problematic character from D&D's past. Tasha is best known for the spell Tasha's Hideous Laughter, and kind of stemmed from this quite like sexist, misogynistic origins. But it appears, again, going by Meehan's preview, who's kind of gone through it and attended a press event for it, that they're attempting to kind of portray Tasha in a more kind of nuanced light in this book. So it's written from her voice, like Xanathar's Guide to Everything was, in the case of Xanathar, and going beyond kind of her portrayal as just this evil kind of sorceress. So there are some promising kind of elements in there. We'll see. It's out. Let me just find the date. It is out on November 17th. So I guess before then or around then we'll be able to get some proper hands-on with it and see exactly what's new and what has been fixed. But the early signs are that it hopefully is making some changes in the right direction. Outside of those kind of big things, there are also just like new puzzles for DMs to drop almost wholesale into campaigns. So there's a whole section on like DM content, including a load of puzzles. There are like a lot of subclasses, some of which have appeared in other books. So the Artificer from Eberron is making a reappearance, and they've kind of been tweaked and revamped. There are a number of...
Yeah, I think they were kind of using it as an opportunity to just sort of like maybe just fix a few of the little road bumps that they had when they put it out in the book in the first place, I think. Yeah,
and there are like a number of subclasses from Unearthed Arcana, which is kind of the playtest section of the D&D website, where they put out some really interesting ideas, but they're in development forms, so they're a little bit unbalanced, or they might just be trying something out. But some of those subclasses are now finding their way into this book. So that's Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, and it's out in November.
One question I have for this is that, because obviously the race traits has been a sort of big a big sort of talking point, which I'm only sort of tangentially aware of what's in the book because I haven't read it myself. Obviously, me and did the preview. But are they basically just saying that you can ignore racial traits if you're making a player character, but they still exist in the world for like all of the monsters, all of the NPCs, etc.?
I don't know the specifics. I believe, from what I know, it's that this book has rules of like, okay, you can ignore them, you can modify them. I don't know if that applies for all monsters and characters, or just kind of the core classes. I just simply don't know, so I can't comment either way. One thing that I will mention is that Alex Meehan followed up with Wizards of the Coast to ask whether these rules would be available anywhere else, or whether you would essentially have to buy the book in order to get what arguably should have been in the RPG from the start, or shouldn't have been. And they said, they confirmed that they will appear in, quote, multiple locations outside of Cauldron of Everything. So they've mentioned that they'll appear in like the D&D Organised Play Program, Adventurers League. So their quote is, "It's important to us that these new options for customizing your character's origin be made accessible to as many Dungeons and Dragons fans as possible." So hopefully that means they will essentially be available for free somewhere at some point, because the idea of having to buy a book, no matter how good the rest of the content in the book is, but really, this stuff should be just out there because it's more of a correction than anything else. The
weird thing for me, and I think one of the biggest problems with these racial traits is not only does it basically have like a sort of, if you are a race, then you are inherently this kind of thing, but it's also the fact that like all the NPCs and monsters that you come up against in that game theoretically have sort of that hardwired sense of like, because they were born this way, that means that they act this way. Like, for example, you've got orcs, which have like a really problematic history, just being like racially evil. So like to have an entire race of creatures be evil by nature is like a really problematic idea.
Yeah.
And like you said, if that's just going to be a thing that they can sort of hand wave into a book, then whilst it is a step in the right direction, it doesn't feel like enough right now.
Yeah. There's definitely, there's a lot of, it's a very wide ranging and, multifaceted conversation. Yeah. Like I think no one is trying to pretend that there aren't major problems with D&D. But hopefully, like I say, hopefully there is, hopefully there is a sign that this stuff is at least like now properly going to be looked at. And who knows, whenever like 6th edition might come out, or 5.5 or what, you would hope that a lot of these changes made in these books will just be rolled into a new edition and become the default.
Like if it becomes I guess it's technically fine to have sort of like recommendations for stuff that you would associate with like certain backgrounds, but when it is hardwired into, you are this race, and that Jake's got some real sneezes in the background, bless you, mate. But yeah, when it's hardwired into your character when you're creating them, and then they say, but optionally you can do this if you want, then it does feel like a bit of a cheap kind of like, in my eyes.
Yeah.
We'll see. We'll see if 6th edition gets released.
We shall see. The other thing they announced just quickly is D&D Celebration, which is an event happening next month, which is kind of like a community-focused event where they said they'll be running games from Rime of the Frost Maiden. I almost said Ancient Mariner. God. Icewind Dale, Rime of the Frost Maiden, which is the next big campaign book or setting book for D&D. And they said there'll be some product announcements and kind of detail there. So hopefully we'll know a little bit more. Like I say, it's a bit early to judge now, and I didn't attend the event. Mian, who unfortunately is not here, did, so she may be able to speak more specifically to that. But again, we'll see what comes of it, but hopefully it's at least a sign that, something is happening, even if it's not to the degree it should be. But we'll find out. The next news story is there is a new Dinosaur Island game called Dinosaur World.
Looks very
for those who don't know, and it's also kind of funny because Dinosaur Island was essentially Jurassic Park.
So Jurassic World.
Yeah.
Sequel, right?
So the fact they've just gone full on with it. But yeah, Dinosaur Island came out a few years ago now and was like a very kaleidoscopic coloured game about literally making a park full of dinosaurs and trying not to have them eat everyone that was visiting the park. It's a worker placement game at its heart, so you you kind of draft dice to get DNA or to get funds or whatever it may be, and then you spend the combination of those DNA to create certain dinosaurs, and you need to build pens to house them in. And the more dangerous dinosaurs you build, you need to then invest in your security. Otherwise, there is a risk that they can break free and eat some of your visitors, which then affects your popularity, and so on. It's.
I would hope so. Yeah.
When you think of a Jurassic Park board game, it's that. It's a Jurassic Park management game. I really liked it. They also did like a 2-player spin-off, which I think was called like Dino Duel or something like that. Which was fine. It was just like a smaller version of that. And now they're doing Dinosaur World, which is kind of billed as a sequel. So it sounds like it's along similar lines. You're collecting DNA, you're building dinosaurs, you're building buildings, you're hiring staff. But yeah, it's, you know, I don't think they've really dug into exactly what is different. I believe it's from the same designers again, or at least one of the same designers. But we'll see what that is. I think Pandasaurus, which is the publisher of Dinosaur Island, just in their tweet just said soon. So whether that's a release or whether that's more information or who knows. Oh, sorry. This story on Dicebreaker.com, which I should have read to the bottom of and forgot, says there'll be a Kickstarter campaign on the September 22nd. So a release date will presumably follow, but they haven't given an idea of the release date.
No one expects you to know what's on Dicebreaker.com. It's not that you have anything to do with it.
Well, this was me, and while I was off, I've been trying to catch up. Moving on to another story that was written while I was away, so I'm probably going to fluff it up. Fate Condensed is a new version of the Fate RPG. It is as it sounds. It's relatively quick on this. It's a kind of streamlined set of rules for Fate, which is I think a relatively popular RPG system.
Yeah.
Like, it's not, I don't think it's up there with Powered by the Apocalypse in terms of being widely known, but it certainly pops up across
Fate's
the place.
one of those like setting agnostic ones, isn't it? So I think people use it for like a number of things that don't maybe have a system that supports what they want to play, kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. I believe Fate is the one that uses kind of plus and minus die results, I think.
Yeah, something like that.
But it's a 60-page, like, I believe it's essentially the full game, but they've just condensed it down to 60 pages. It's out in PDF right now for pay what you want, and then it will be coming to a physical edition later in the year. So that's that. And wow, the publisher suggested price for the PDF is just £3. So
that's great. Yeah,
so
£3 for
go and nab it.
For a relatively mainstream RPG is really good.
Yeah, it should go without saying that when people say pay what you want, please support publishers and creators. Yeah. Don't just nick it for free. Moving on to Magic the Gathering. Just a quick one. There is
Where's Johnny when you need him?
So announced last year was the first full set for Commander format, which is kind of probably Magic's most popular format. So Commander is, you have a deck of 100 cards rather than the usual 60, and you have one commander who's like a legendary creature or a planeswalker, and you build your deck based on the colours of that card. So if they are red and white, you can have red and white cards, or wherever it may be. But it's never kind of had a full set before. They've put out pre-constructed decks for it, and people have obviously played it using various other sets. But Commander Legends will be the first proper set for it, which also means it's getting dedicated boosters for the first time. So you'll now be able to kind of draft it properly. And they're putting out kind of official rules for playing draft with Commander. So you'll be building a 60-card deck. They're introducing more partner cards, partner commanders, which allow you to have multiple commanders that work together. So you can also then have more colours in your deck. And that's kind of it. Like, it's Commander. They are putting out some more cards in it as well. But alongside that, they are releasing Commander Collection Green, which is the first in like a new series of sets. Again, around Commander, they're really pushing for Commander this year. And it will feature 8 reprints of green cards for Commander, which I believe there'll be a foil version that's exclusive to certain retailers. and then there'll be a normal version as well. But like I said, they've said it's the first in a series, so I presume they'll go through the different mana colours and do one for each. But yeah, it's if you play Commander, it's a good way of getting into it.
A bit for that one.
Commander is a really great format. If you haven't played Magic, like it's a fun way of getting into it because it's like you just can kind of pick if you're not playing super competitively, you can pick a commander that you think looks cool and then kind of build around them. Obviously, there's a lot more deck building to be done because there's 100 cards. But you can play it 4 players as well, which I think is typically how it's played. So rather than like one-on-one Magic, it's kind of built more for big multiplayer matches. But Commander, it's a cool format. The boosters, I can't see that they've announced how much they'll cost, whether they'll be the same as normal draft boosters and collector boosters. But hopefully that's the case, coming off of Double Masters, which was a recent Magic set where the boosters were like 12 quid each. Yes. Double Masters, it's worth saying, had a selection of rare cards and kind of sought after cards, which bumped the price up a bit, but £12 for a booster, that's quite a lot. Let's move on.
A game of Star Realms for that.
And just remember, when they say the cards are rare, they choose how rare they are.
Yeah. Well, the nice thing with Double Masters is that, not to go off on a tangent, is they reprint a lot of the kind of more expensive cards, so it makes them more available. But obviously, they are also controlling how available those cards are. Yeah. I am no expert in the Magic the Gathering secondary market, but from what I know from speaking to various people who are much more knowledgeable than me, Double Masters is a great card collection at a very high price, which tends to be par for the course with Magic.
It does seem like the more things they do like this, it does seem to just, like, as a new player, why would you choose the physical version over the digital? Like, because they keep introducing artificial scarcity, and then there are so many cards that it's difficult to keep up with, and then you have to keep track of which ones aren't in circulation anymore, and like all of that is just done for you in Arena. And also it's just like an old and clunky game, which means you kind of need some computerization to just sort it out for you. So like by saying, hey, here's some of those rare cards that you've been after, you can maybe get them in one of these really expensive booster packs. It's just like, I don't know. I don't see it as a very long-term strategy.
Yeah, the feeling seems to be that they are very much pushing for Arena, the app version, to be the thing as well, to compete with the likes of Hearthstone or. I would imagine because it's it's a lot easier for people to sink however many pounds it is on gems or coins time after time in an app rather than go out to a store, pick up a couple of boosters. I don't know, but Arena at least has like a good onboarding process. I think what I've seen, they've put out a new starter set which is billed as like Magic the Gathering Arena starter set, but it's a physical starter set, which is a weird thing in itself. But the thing seems to be that the tutorial in the physical pack just points you to the app anyway. So you pick up the physical pack and it just tells you to go and play Arena. So
well, sort of like, because when we were first starting to cover Magic the Gathering here, because like we don't like we make no secret of saying that like on the video team none of us have really ever like been that fully into Magic. And I remember Johnny just saying, what's the best way to learn? And they were just like, probably just play Arena. And it's like, well, it does just make people want to play Arena more, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I like Magic for what it is. I think it's one of those things where, I don't know, it's if you're into it, you're really into it. It's harder to dip in and out of. But there've definitely been times where I picked up a dual decks pack, or whatever they're called, where they have 2 pre-constructed decks, and it's like, oh, this is fun to play. But it's like I've never felt that urge of now I need to buy 50 more boosters. But
it can also just not be for us.
Yeah,
that's fine.
Yeah, that's absolutely okay. The last story on this billing is that there's a new game from the publisher of Race for the Galaxy and Roll for the Galaxy and whatnot. that whole series of sci-fi games. So Yay. Race for the Galaxy, Roll for the Galaxy, New Frontiers, Jump Drive, I think is the smaller card game spin-off from Race as well. It's Rio Grande Games who also publish Dominion. And this new game is called Beyond the Sun, which is a very sci-fi name. that sounds like it could be any kind of sci-fi novel, movie, game. You know,
it's also very confusing as a title because what does Beyond the Sun clarify? Because we go around the sun every year.
Well, let me tell you, Wheels. So it's a strategy game, and the premise of it is that the Earth is dying, and that humanity, rather than fix the Earth and maybe be greener, has decided to just ditch it and run, and they are running beyond the sun.
I thought this was science fiction, Matt Jarvis.
Science fact. God. So I think it's not a deeply thematic game. So the kind of premise of it is very kind of like broad, like, oh yeah, you're leaving Earth for some reason. I don't know. Pick up these cards. So the gameplay is that on a central board there is essentially a technology tree. So there are multiple branches of different technologies, which are cards. So it's randomized each game, and you are aiming to unlock those by like performing actions, gaining resources. You're also spreading your particular faction between different planets. You can build up your kind of military might if you want to, but the core of the game is moving along these technology trees to make your actions more efficient, be able to do more, get more, blah 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 blah, get points. It is so although it's from the publisher of Race of the Galaxy, it's not related to those games, despite kind of being a similar sci-fi theme. It appears to be the first game from Dennis K. Chan, kind of their debut, and it's 90 to 120 minutes long, so up to a couple of hours, which makes it sound like it's going to be quite hefty. It doesn't look like there's I mean, it looks like there's a lot going on in the kind of first gameplay pictures they've shown, but it's not. It's that central board of a technology tree, lots of cards, and then kind of individual player boards with tokens. But it's also said to kind of have a unique cylindrical economy. So you choose to either invest in growing your own economy, making more money, or feeding your people so that they can expand to more planets. So it's like, would you like capitalism, or would you like, socialism? Would you like to feed the people, or just squeeze every last money out of them? It sounds kind of interesting. There's not loads to go by at the moment because obviously a lot of these kinds of games, it will be in motion on the table. You'll kind of work out how it is, but it seems pretty interesting. I don't know. There's a lot of sci-fi games out there that are this kind of like heavy strategy, expand around the stars, lead your faction to greatness kind of thing. But I don't know. I like the technology tree idea. At least feels a little bit different.
Yeah, I do like tech trees in games. Like I'm a big fan of Comet, which is basically a tech tree game. Like I think it's one that can be a bit clunky to implement because like computer games obviously have always done it a little bit more easily because you can just click. But yeah, I do think they do make it quite interesting in strategy stuff when you kind of build your asymmetry through the game. If that makes sense. Like you start off the same, but then everyone sort of goes in divergent paths and stuff, which is quite cool.
Yeah, bringing things full circle. I think that was the thing that, again, like Tapestry lacked, right? It's like there was no progression. It was like, oh, you can unlock that, but they're not connected in some way. It's not you unlock the wheel, then you get chariots. That
was another thing that didn't like connect for me as well, because like there were 4 sort of like tech trees, but actually they were just tech lines, and everyone was going across them anyway. And it's like by the end of the game, most people are pretty far across all of them, so no one really felt all that different.
Yeah.
But yeah.
All right, that is it in terms of news. So let's move on to emails. If you've got an email or a question for the Dicebreaker team, you can reach us at podcast@dicebreaker.com, or you can find us on Twitter and Facebook at Join Dicebreaker. So let us know your questions.
I've got an email here from everyone who lives near me who says, "Hi Wheels, we've all decided to be as loud as physically possible whenever you record a podcast. How do you feel about that? Love, everyone who lives near you." I won't be answering that one. But let's look at some of the fan submissions.
It's a very different podcast as we just read out slightly passive-aggressive emails but don't answer them.
I'm here for it though.
Why are they beeping their horn? What are they doing?
So I think we had a helicopter go over earlier here. So.
I heard somebody's cat also.
It's probably Holly. Yeah.
Oh yeah, Toto's also in there.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing that was the Dicebreaker news chopper, Matt.
Oh yeah.
Which has been keeping an eye on board game traffic.
It's the eye on the sky. I can't think of a pun, so I've just said the normal
Eye on
thing.
the island of Skye.
The eye on the Dicebreaker. We made it work. We got there, folks. Let's read some emails. Lolies, would you like to read this one from Anthony, please?
Hello, Anthony. Anthony asks, how does the Dicebreaker team discover hidden gems? I discovered villagers because of Dicebreaker, one of my faves. I mean, I know that we used to find a lot of games through events.
Yeah.
Now I don't really know anymore.
Yeah. I don't know. What's your personal like how have you found the most sort of like games you weren't expecting to like that just sort of came out of nowhere like these?
I think friends, like a lot of the games, that when people like got the box out, I'd be like, and then we'd play and I'd be like, this is amazing. It would be a lot of just friends whipping out a game and me just playing it and loving it. So it's very much word of mouth, as it were, I guess. Also, I'm a lot on board game Instagram, and when you're on there, you just end up seeing like the same game popping up a lot of the time. So you're like, okay, this thing is popular right now. So, yeah.
I do think board games lack that sort of discoverability that video games have, because there's so many like digital storefronts and stuff for the video game space that it's like it can be quite easy to find something that you like based on what you've already played, kind of thing. Whereas board games are so, there's like a general sort of, it's a worker placement game, which gives you a vague idea, but there can be such a complete difference between two, and like, the quality and the theme and everything like that. But we do get a lot of sort of like, we do just sort of scan the new releases that come, that like Asmodee are pushing out into the UK and stuff like that, and all those kind of things. But a lot of the time, you do just kind of have to be a bit lucky, I think. But your main source of information on hot new board games, of course, should be dicebreaker.com.
Yep, thank you. I didn't need to ride in with the old brand train on that one. So it is worth saying, like, obviously we're plugging the website because we are the website, but we do try to balance like covering the big obvious stuff, so a new Ticket to Ride or a new D&D thing, and also digging out some of the kind of hidden stuff. In terms of that stuff, like a lot of it is Kickstarter, because that's where a lot of those smaller games pop up, and because they are from creators that you've never heard of. And I think Villagers was a Kickstarter game and just popped up one day. I was like, oh, this seems really interesting. It's got a great art style. I think but Lolies and Wheels were right in terms of like events they are such a huge part of it. So this year has been a particular challenge because board games, it's really hard sometimes if you're not having an expert team of journalists explain how something works in a very well-written article on dicebreaker.com. Like
available now.
Sometimes it's hard to just look at a picture of a game and get a sense of what you're doing, like Will says, like what you're doing, how it feels. Whereas if you walk past something at a show, you will either hear people chatting, like if it's a kind of party game, you might hear them kind of whooping at each other, or you can just kind of look in, peer over, watch a few minutes of a turn and go, oh, I understand like the very basics of what you do in this game. But it's really hard to do that in a lot of board game trailers tend to be these big flashy CGI things that capture some atmosphere but give you no clue about how that game plays. It's like, okay, I know this has like a nice looking set of miniatures, but what do I do for the, past the 30 seconds of looking at it and going, ooh, actually playing the game for 2 hours, like, what am I doing? So...
Like, I can guarantee I would never have played Happy Salmon, one of the best games ever made, without, like, dogged recommendations from these two. Like, it's just that presentation of, like, a little fish bag, and I was like, surely this is, like, a kid's game or something. But then it is that weird thing with a lot of board games where you look at something and you're like, what? And then you play it and you're like, oh, it's incredible. I don't know why they chose this theme, but it's incredible.
Yeah. Like I've said this before, but Happy Salmon is the perfect example because I walked past it at Essen and it was a table full of people like shouting at each other and slapping each other's wrists. And it was like, what is this? And it kind of drew me in. And then like obviously Happy Salmon you watch for 10 seconds and you immediately go, oh, you're matching cards and you do the thing. Sure, that's the game. But it's the atmosphere. Like describing it in words doesn't really work.
No.
But when you see it in motion, and again, you know, let's plug Dicebreaker because that's why we're here. But that's kind of why we exist, is to help with that, because that's such a challenge, is understanding how this stuff works. So that's why we play games, or why we describe games, to give people a sense of like, oh, this is how it works. This is why you should be interested. So,
I think I would say quickly, like, this is more RPGs for me than tabletop board games and stuff. But a lot of the like new stuff that I find in the RPG sort of like itch.io and all the kind of indie spaces, especially like the ones that I try and push onto the video side as well, is just sort of following designers that I like, and then they'll talk about designs that they like. Like, you know, if you really like whatever it is, like Lawyer Up by Mike Nade, then go follow Mike Nade and see what he talks about, because people make games that they like to play. So if they start talking about things that they like to play, which they haven't made, odds are you might like it as well. So just following designers and seeing what they talk about, and, you know, just utilizing that sort of social presence they have is also a really good way of just sort of reaching out and like finding things you wouldn't normally be exposed to.
For sure. Speaking of hidden gems, quickly, have you had a particular hidden gem from like the last year or so that has really stood out? It's a question from one Matt Jarvis.
Oh God, you put me on the spot.
Well, I think I've mentioned this before. I think it may have even been a question on a previous podcast, but Shobu I really like as a kind of, I feel like a game that not many people have played. It's just a really neat kind of abstract strategy game in the kind of vein of Hive or chess like. But I think it's really, really clever. I also think, I don't know if Point Salad is super well known.
It is.
I was going to say Point Salad, but then I thought, is that not actually quite interesting? Quite popular.
I think it is
sorry.
pretty
Yeah.
popular, yeah.
Yeah, Point Salad is definitely one of those games where you look at it and you're like, and
Yeah.
you play it and you're like, oh.
That's one of the ones that I saw on Instagram for ages, and I was like, what? Like, it looks bleh. I'm trying not to swear. And then we played it, and I was like, oh my God, this is great.
Yeah, so good. The crew, I guess, as well, was
Yeah.
like not all that talked about, but really cool.
It did win an award.
Yeah.
I think like
No, Matt, I can't think
No,
of
I
anything.
can't.
I guess there's a weird line at some point as well, because like most of the board game industry is hidden gems.
Yeah.
Like other than the very big ones that float to the top, like your Catans, your Ticket to Ride, your Azules, most of it is small stuff. Like I think another one is House Flippers, and that was another one where it was like just walking past it at, I think that was also Essen, but last year, it was like, oh, this is like a load of cards on a table, and then as soon as that sand timer flips, everyone's just dashing around and throwing cards, and it's like, oh right, this is like, yeah, House Flippers is really fun. I missed that game. I think we have a copy left in the office.
Stay Cool had that kind of
doesn't
same
like it.
energy that I really liked.
Oh yeah, Stay Cool. That's I think they play really well in person because there's a lot of people shouting at each
Yeah.
other, and kind of like the energy immediately fizzes. Whereas like long strategy games are a bit harder to, if you walk past a load of people deep in thought and slowly moving a pawn. But yeah, thank you for your question, Anthony. Wheels, would you like to read this one from Oliver? This is along similar lines, actually.
I would, because I can talk passionately about something on this one. So Oliver Gerlach says, are there any out-of-print games that you've spent unreasonable levels of time, effort, or money trying to track down? Which ones and why? Summoner Wars is one of the best card games in the world. I think they're finally reprinting it now. Now that Plaid Hat have gone independent again, because they've broken off from Asmodee, haven't they?
Yeah, I think it's a new edition, so not just a reprint; it's a whole new revamp.
So look out for that, because the amount of times I've tried to find boxes of Summoner Wars, like there's this one deck that I played on like the Tabletop Sim mod that I love so much, you just can't buy it anywhere anymore, and I was like, it's the worst. So like when that new edition comes out, I'm going to be absolutely all over it. But yeah, is there anything you guys have?
I think like for me there's definitely like I've got a very small list of stuff that's out of print that like I'd like, but I've not spent like an unreasonable amount of time or effort or anything. Like I just hope to find it. I have a look every now and again. I don't think I would spend much more than what I would expect it to cost, like at RRP. So there's nothing that I'm like, oh my god, I desperately need this right now and I'll pay it. Although, actually, Secret Hitler, which wasn't technically out of print, it just wasn't in print in the UK when I got it, was only available in the US when I was trying to get it. And my brother lives in the US, and I asked him if I got a copy sent to him, would he bring it home for Christmas with him? We are German, so he was like, no, because he obviously didn't know what the game was about, so he just saw the title and was like, are you joking? So I ended up paying, it was $30 for the game, and I paid another $30 to get it sent over.
Oh my gosh.
So that's the most I've ever, because I really, really wanted the game, because it is one of my favorite games, but that's probably as crazy as I've ever gotten. and then annoyingly, it was available in the UK from like the following year or something.
It's the craziest you've ever gotten in this context.
Yeah, of course. That was a given.
I think like often it's those Kickstarter games, although there haven't been loads where I felt like I've missed out. One game I've always wanted to play that is unbelievably hard to find is Glory to Rome, which is like notorious for being out of print and extremely rare. But I believe that I've seen some folks compare it to Fort to Glory to Rome. And there was a game excitingly about shipping containers, not Container, a different game. Called Import Export that I believe also was kind of like a spiritual successor, so it was Glory to Rome's kind of core gameplay, but shipping containers. And
that's they were like, oh, yeah, the Roman Empire is cool and everything, but how can we really give this a real debonair, like, you know, James Bond atmosphere to it?
Well, how many?
I know, shipping containers.
Now, Wills, how many games about the Romans can you name? I'm willing to bet quite a few. How many games about shipping containers can you name?
Well, see, now you've derived the context from that in a different way, Matt. The reason I can't name any shipping container games is because I don't care about any of them.
One day we will play Container, and I will convert you to a shipping container fan.
Is that the closed economy ruthless one?
That's one of those,
That's the kind of game that's just going to give me a stress heart attack, but I'm up for it.
Again, I would say that's like a hidden gem in that it looks utterly dull and is incredible. But yeah, Glory to Rome I've always wanted to play. I know that people make like print and play copies at home, which I'm not sure of the legality because I don't believe it's available as like a free.
I mean, like,
or they've taken the
mechanics. If people to buy it, they should make it available somewhere. So.
Yeah, but yeah, I think that's the main one. I don't know the game that I've spent the most money on to like acquire a hard to find copy. I've definitely looked at a few games. Oh, like Zia Legends of a Drift System. That wasn't, it was kind of out of print, and I just happened to get lucky with a copy from Thirsty Meeples, I think, in Oxford, for about 60 quid, which wasn't excessive because I think that's normally what it sells for. But I know that game was hard to find, and that is a great game. So there we go. I will read this one from Lou on Twitter. How do you curate your collection and control it when it begins to get too big?
I don't. Just let it spill everywhere. Like tendrils wrapping itself around my flat. That's about it, really.
My collection's actually pretty small. I think it's because I only buy a game when I know I really, really, really like it. So whilst I like a lot of games, there's not that many. And also I think part of it is as well, I do go through that thought process of, am I going to play this a lot? Like, are the people that I've got, like, to hand, aka my housemate, my boyfriend, are they going to be wanting to play this with me more than once? So, yeah, my collection's pretty small. I only have, like, games I really, really like. I've got a couple of games that I've never played, because they were, like, they seemed like a good deal at the time, and they're still in shrink wrap 3 years later. But usually I'm very strict on having to have played a game before I buy it, usually, and needing to be. I think that happened when I bought Photosynthesis a couple of years ago, like when it first came out and everyone went crazy about it. And again, Board Game Instagram was like all about photosynthesis because obviously it's a really nice game to photograph. And so at UK Games Expo I bought a copy, we played it, and I sold it to my friend straight after because I hated it. And then I think after that I was like, you know, I'm gonna to play before I buy now, because as well with like TTS and stuff like that, like Board Game Arena, there is, and also like I've got lots of friends who buy board games all the time, and obviously with Dicebreaker and everything, there's a like we have access to games, like just being able to play the game, and then if I'm like I want to own this in my home because I want to play it that much, then I'll buy it. But
yeah, that's a pretty good process. I think I've said this before, like, so we have a bed that lifts up. I think they're called ottomans, but so when we moved in, it was like, okay, this space will be the board game space. This will limit our collection. And then that quickly fell apart. So that's basically full under there. And then on top of the bookshelf, we have 10 games. And then behind the door, we have probably another dozen. And then in the cupboard, we have a crokinole board. So it's quickly spun out of... It's not horrific. We do get rid of games, but it definitely immediately broke the rule of let's keep everything under the bed, because there were a few games where it's just like, well, this is really good. Like Twilight Imperium 4 is on top of the bookshelf because it's like, this is really good, but also it's like a quarter of the bed. So we're not going to fit it anywhere else. But typically, like creating collection, there was a point previously where I was playing probably in the realm of like 20 to 25 games a month, which was a lot and was exhausting, and also meant having to do something with those games so that I would give them to charity shops, because obviously then it was benefiting others, and with games that I have purchased myself that I like just don't like want to play anymore, like I've moved on, or there's like a version of the game that I prefer, like I'll offer them to friends first, and then like normally it will go to a charity shop, just because I feel like charity shops are like a really good place to find games like that. I feel like anything to get rid of like the 16 copies of Monopoly missing pieces and like 6 versions of Trivial Pursuit that only have half the cards. Like you often see some real not great games in charity shops. So I'm kind of on like a one-person mission to turn back the tide and get some good games into charity shops. So I'll try and like spread them across different shops around my local area, in the hope that some day I will see like a post or a tweet or something where someone's like, oh my god, you'll never believe what I found.
That's like the number one reason why I go into charity shops, is because I always see people on Facebook posting about how they got this like amazing game for like £2.50 and it's like in perfect condition. So I always go into charity shops and I always find just like a battered copy of Pictionary or some kind of weird like board game that was based on a show from the 80s or something.
Matt, you just sounded like Michael Caine in the Batman there. He was just like, I hope one day, Master Wayne, I can look across a charity shop and see you buying a mint condition of Twilight Imperium 4th edition for 20 quid.
I'd like to be specific. I've never been on the other end of this, so I've never found like an amazing game in a charity shop. But actually, I will say that a while back, I was speaking to my mum about this, and she didn't remember it. But she, for my birthday when I was, I don't know, 12, something like that, she found a copy of Rainer Knizia's The Lord of the Rings game in a charity shop.
Yes, we did that as well.
Which I played a lot.
I like that game.
Yeah, it's notable for including Fatty, the Lord of the Rings character that no one remembers.
Yes. That's whenever I introduce that game to anyone, that's my favourite joke, to be like, you can play as all the hobbits that you know and love from the films. Frodo, Sam, Merry, Pippin, Fatty.
Yeah, it's like a really strange inclusion. But I like that game. But that was also like, she doesn't remember buying it or giving it to me for my birthday. It was definitely in the boot of her car when I opened it up once, and I remember her just being like, "Oh yeah, that's for you," because I just stumbled upon it. But she doesn't remember that. So it seems that maybe it just materialized in the boot, and nobody knows where this copy came from.
It's like that copy of Atmosphere that arrived at Ian's store or whatever.
Haunted by spirits. But yes, support charity shops. They're particularly at the moment. And if you're looking to give games away, it's not a bad place to give them. Lolies, would you like to read this one from Kieran, please?
Hello, Kieran. Kieran asks, what's your favourite mechanic in any tabletop RPG?
Ooh.
I know that Wheels loves fights. He loves
Oh yeah, I love combat. Yeah, any kind of combat, that's me. Yeah. Turn-based combat, that's what RPGs are all about for me.
I think I've got two for this. So in a general kind of thing, I like exploding dice. Like, because it can get so silly that, like, I don't really play any RPG too seriously, as you'll know if you've ever watched any video I'm in. So I think the idea of, like, rolling to do something and then being able to achieve it to, like, a magnitude of 40 times that is very funny. It's like trying to pick a lock and just, like, exploding the bolts out of the door because you managed to, you know, roll 4 6s in a row. Something like that. It was actually that Cyberpunk, the first playthrough we did, where, Wills, I think you were jumping from a train or to a train.
Yeah, it was a really mundane action, but I was like, I do 4 somersaults.
Yeah, because you rolled like 3 crits in a row. And it's that kind of thing of like, oh, okay, like this just gives it that. It's exciting, right? It's like, oh, I rolled one, I rolled another. It's a bit more exciting than like, oh, I rolled a crit 20, great. But if you can then roll another and another, and it just goes so beyond the expected. I'm a big fan of that. I've sung the praises of Trail of Cthulhu before, but I really like the mechanic in there where you just know stuff. Like, you don't, going the other way, you don't roll. You just know. So if you...
That's Gumshoe, right?
Yeah, Gumshoe system, yeah. So if you have points in antiquity, you can look at a vase and just know that it is a particular type of vase because, of course, you know antiquity. Whereas you can then spend points to get extra detail. So it's almost like you're spending time in a way, or focus to pick out extra details, or like to go up to something and examine it in more detail. But I really like, in a detective game, the idea that you're not rolling to recall your own knowledge, because it always felt a bit silly in things like Call of Cthulhu, which Trail of Cthulhu is based on, where you could have knowledge in something, but if you rolled like a 0, you would suddenly not be able to know your own knowledge. It's like, oh, I'm an expert in this, but for some reason I can't recall any of the knowledge I have despite being an expert. So yes, there you go.
I think Gumshoe was like, I remember reading about it, and the person who wrote it was literally just like, I was trying to make a detective story in an RPG and it just didn't make any sense, so I just had to write a new RPG so it made sense. I think my favourite, actually, to be honest, like, it might just be because I've recently read it, so it's fresh in my mind. But I've been reading the Alien RPG rulebook, and the way they do stress is actually really cool. I don't know if you've read about it, but basically you have, whenever you do anything, you have a pool of d6s. So, like, say you want to, I don't know, say you want to, like, convince someone of doing something. You have, like, your base stat and then your skill. So you've got empathy, which is, like, anything you do with, like, people. So say you've got 4 in that. And then you've got, like, a 2 in, like, manipulation or something. So you add that on top. So you've got 66s. But as you go through the game and, like, bad things happen, your character gets more stressed. Just like in Blades in the Dark, you're going to add to a stress counter. But instead of just being like, once you reach this threshold, you have reached too much stress, which is a little bit abstract, and it's a bit like, you know, like, you don't, it's never like a sort of straw that breaks the camel's back with stress. It's always just like, it mounts and mounts, and you feel it that whole way, and then it just, like, you snap. So, like, the way that they do it is, whenever you add stress, you also add that to every roll you do. So you've got your 6 dice that you had at the start, but because I'm 4 stressed, I add 4 different coloured d6s to my pool, which means that technically I'm more effective, because when you're stressed, like, your fight or flight activates and you become more efficient, like, you become more hyper aware, you're more, like, your adrenaline's pumping, so you're more athletic and all that kind of stuff. But if you ever roll a 1 on any of your stress dice, you go into panic. So it's like, so you're always teetering on the edge of something really bad happening, because, like, you're stressed, and that's how stress works. Like, it's a really good like, mechanical way of communicating a really human experience, which I really love. And just another little shout out to one little bit I read as well. Whenever you want to kill, like, a human in the game who's defenseless, you have to fail an empathy roll, because, like, it's a big deal. So, like, if you ever, like say you've shot someone in the leg and they can't fight back anymore, if you want to finish them off, you have to not be empathetic enough. You have to deal with the fact that you're killing another human being. I really like mechanics that force you to actually play like a real human, rather than just being like, I am a block of stats who is walking around the world. But regardless of whether you fail or succeed the role, you always take stress, because you had to sit there and say, do I want to kill another human, which is obviously a really stressful thing to live through. So yeah, it's really cool. I've been enjoying reading that rulebook. It's a bit dense because it's very like, here's a big RPG about a system and a series of films that have been going since the 80s. So it's like, it's a bit chunky, but some of the mechanics are in there are really cool. I can see why it was up for that.
I think when you were saying about like RPGs that make you play like a human, kind of made me think of obviously like I don't have as much RPG experience as you guys, but like when we played Jiangshi recently, I really enjoyed that, and yes. I talked about it on a previous podcast, but the language thing was something that I really enjoyed a lot, because it's not something that really comes up a lot. Like in D&D, if you speak giant, you speak giant, and that's it. Like you're probably fluent in it because there's nothing to say you aren't. And I really enjoyed that in Jiangshi, where language barrier was a thing, because obviously you are playing different generations of a Chinese immigrant family in America, and so like different generations will have different grasps of the languages of that they spoke. And like for me, again, I brought this up on a previous podcast, but for me, like somebody who didn't start speaking English until I was 10, you know, like for me, someone who moved to Ireland and had been speaking German for 10 years before that, and like language has always been a big part of my like life in that terms. Like even now, years later, like my German's gotten worse, you know, like language is like such an interesting thing for me, and the fact that they like that they dealt with that was really interesting to me from that perspective, and I really enjoyed that, and that's been one of my favorite experiences playing an RPG because of that.
I think that's a really good argument for like, you need more diverse people making games, because then you get those experiences that you don't just experience if every single game is made by a straight white man. Like it's you need to have that breadth of experience for people to actually understand how these things work. So it's like sure, yeah, you play D&D and everyone's got like 4 languages just like listed off that never come up, and it's like, that's not interesting at all. Whereas someone who's actually dealt with that, like you said, like moving to another country and having to learn that language to like become part of that culture is a really like personal experience.
Oh, sorry, I need to answer the door very quickly.
Okay. Yeah, Jiangxi's really cool.
I really liked it a lot. I was first thinking about the dice, but I was like, I don't know how that really like dealt with the story, if it did at all. And then I was thinking about the language thing, and I thought that was actually, especially when you were talking about like real human experiences, I was like, that is a real human experience.
But here's that thing though, isn't it? Like you play, like when you're playing D&D, you're always just thinking like, oh, this isn't what my character would do, but like I've got a really good role in this, so I'm just going to do that. And it's like, well, you know, it's not very fun, is it?
All right, let's squeeze in one last question. Lolies, you read that one, so Wheels, could you read this one from Adrian, please?
Yes. Adrian's, as Lona says, is there a board or tabletop game out there that has lore you find fascinating, but has rules you can't get on board with, or vice versa? Matt, you've been taking the last. Oh, you don't look too. I was too happy about being jumped up.
Well, I knew this was coming because obviously I picked the questions. But I was genuinely quite struggling, because I think, particularly with lore or rules that are good, rules that I can't get on board with, but lore that is good. Often I find that like if the rules are good enough, it can kind of pull me through with a lot of tabletop games. Obviously, RPGs can be different. But for instance, there are quite a few kind of just blandly fantasy games where it's like, oh, these are fun to play. Like, I would say that Gloomhaven has an interesting world, but it is also very much mired in that like fantasy. Like, there's nothing surprising in the fantasy of Gloomhaven, right? Like it does a really good job of capturing some of that, you know, particularly when you're doing those events, like in between missions or when you're dungeon crawling. Like it has an interesting world, but I would never be interested enough to read a Gloomhaven novel, because I think it would just feel, and it's similar with Magic. There's Magic novels that come out, and I've read kind of extracts of them just out of like curiosity, but never been really kind of taken with it. And even I think even D&D, like to some degree, like I love Baldur's Gate as like a video game series, but I don't think it's like I've never been fussed about reading D&D novels or Black Library novels for Warhammer. I found that often, like a lot of them just feel a bit like, like in some ways I'd rather see a more interesting, like these work fine as games because it's the gameplay that's pulling me in, but the world alone is not enough, I think. So yeah, that's a bit of a like iffy answer that doesn't quite answer the question, but I think it's just that thing of like a lot of the games I enjoy are kind of the marriage of both theme and narrative rather than one or the other, because I think if one is severely lacking, I'll just play something else that has a better balance, because it's very, very rare that like something has a strong enough theme to make bad rules worth it.
Yeah. I do, although you say that, like I kind of have the opposite thing with Warhammer, mainly the fantasy, because obviously I've had a lot of reason to delve into the fantasy, but I do now have I am quite fond of the characters in there and all that kind of stuff. And like, I don't think I'd ever play Warhammer Fantasy Tabletop. Like, I know they're bringing back the old rule set, but I don't think I'd play it because it's really clunky and like everything's like just very old and they're sort of patching it up. We'll see how it looks in the new edition that they pull out, but I do love that world, but I just like the rules are so uninteresting to me because I think it's such a kind of like with Magic. It was one of the first tabletop miniatures games, and now it feels like we have progressed past the need for Warhammer games, like the bog standard ones for me. So yeah, I think I'd come at that from the different angle. But like you said, it's like most of the time I play some games with really good rules, but yeah, just the world doesn't interest me in the slightest. I think because so many do just have that vanilla RPG kind of like goblins and ghouls and swords and shields sort of kind of vibe to them.
I suppose I'll add the caveat that when I was a kid collecting Warhammer, I never really played Warhammer by the rules. I just flicked through like the rule books or the source books for each faction. So I suppose in some ways maybe I'm with you on Warhammer, because maybe like the nostalgia of like, oh yeah, Warhammer, like it's fun to do, like to have a load of miniatures on a table, and it's like that is fun, but also I never really played by the proper rules. Like it was more the idea of the rules and the idea of like, I've got this big army of like skeletons or whatever it was more interesting than actual Warhammer. It was the
fantasy they sold you on, I think. Yeah. Whereas like, and they still do. Like that's why I often find myself painting Warhammer more than I do play it.
Yeah.
Like it's like I love the miniatures. Like they're beautiful. Like genuinely, like I know they're very chunky and they're very like big scary demons, but they're so well crafted. Like they've been making miniatures for such a long time now, Games Workshop, that they are really good at it. Yeah. And say what you want about how expensive they are, but they are like just genuinely beautiful models, and I love painting them.
For
so
sure.
Like it is that thing of like I do care about the world, but I don't think I'll probably play it all that often, just because the rules are just a bit old and decrepit.
Yeah. Lolies, anything come to mind?
You've had all this time to think.
I know, I've been thinking a lot. I think like my first thought was, and this is kind of going back to RPGs, whilst I really enjoyed our playthrough of Lasers and Feelings, and I love space and all that, I do find like that the system for me is a bit binary, like with the fact that it's like everything's split into lasers and feelings. It's like, to me that doesn't really appeal that much. Like I don't think some people like think that, I don't know, with like D&D for example, there's too much going on, but I think that's like a bit more representative than just like two kind of things that you are dividing everything into. So yeah, whilst I kind of enjoy like the setting, and I really enjoyed like our playthrough of it, I just like, I even like used to listen to a podcast who did like a season where they played Lasers and Feelings, and I wasn't really into it then either. I don't know, it's too like, I don't like splitting things just two ways. I think it doesn't really work for me. But yeah, that's the one that came to my head.
Yeah, that's fair. It's one page, isn't it? So it's always going to be like, yeah.
But what if they added Carly Rae Jepsen?
No.
Is it emotions and swords in the Carly Rae Jepsen RPG that replace lasers and feelings? Because if they don't, we've played it, and I don't
think so.
All right, I think that is just about all we've got time for this week. But before we leave you, let's look ahead to what's coming up on youtube.com/Dicebreaker. Video team collectively, what can we expect?
Okay, if you've just finished this podcast then, and you've watched it on the day that it's come out, then you might have missed yesterday. Pardon me. We did a live play of the Rezzed RPG with Nate Crowley and Grant Hout as well, which you may remember. The troublesome pair from our playthrough of Reverse Beastmaster, the last game that they played, that they made, together. Which is one of the first videos that Lolies did.
That was my
us,
first
which,
ever RPG on the team.
Yeah, that set the tone, I think, quite a lot. Coming up after that, we've got the conclusion of this season of Dungeon Breaker as we look forward to trying out a new game after that.
Oh my god, the season finale this time. Oh boy.
Yeah, there's a lot that happens. There's a lot that happens. And then on Sunday, Johnny has been delving into the digital tabletop world of Roll20 to give you some sort of introductions to that. But do you want to take next week? Have you got the schedule up?
Yeah,
Ladies?
I just got it up there. Next week, we Blades in the Dark Part 3 concludes on the Wednesday. So that'll be the last episode of Pilfers and Friends. I know he'll be greatly missed. We'll be painting. We'll be doing a painting stream on Thursday podcast, and then we'll update you what's to come after that on next week's podcast.
And over on the website, which is dicebreaker.com, as I say, Alex Mean has written up a little preview of Tasha's Cauldron of Everything if you're interested in some of the changes that's bringing. We have a list of the best dexterity games up, which of course Crokinole is on there, because it's not just the best dexterity game, but probably the best game ever made. And next week we have a feature coming up that is looking at the Return of Dark Tower, or Return to Dark Tower as it's actually called, the reboot of the 80s kind of adventure game that had a big electronic tower in the middle of the table. So Dan Jolin has chatted with a few of the folks behind that. And we have various other things coming up. Obviously, your daily dose of news from around the world of tabletop, and much, much more. So it's, as always, it will be a week to look forward to on Dicebreaker. If you're interested, our summer range of merchandise is now out, which you can find at dicebreaker.myshopify.com. We'll have more to announce about what our plans are for PAX Online and EGX Digital, which are coming up next month, September 12th to the 20th, very soon. We've given some teasers here and there, but we will be appearing across both shows with some very exciting and wildly chaotic things, and also just some really interesting bits that I'm very much looking forward to. So keep your eyes peeled for that. But until then, this has been the Dicebreaker podcast. We will be back next Friday with the next episode. Thank you for joining me, Alex Lolies.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Hold for applause.
It's that enthusiasm and sincerity
And like
that we all love.
What? Yeah, that one.
Thanks for being here, Wheels.
Oh, you're very welcome. It's been a fantastic time as always, Mr. Matthew Jarvis.
Okay, now you're overselling it. I have been Matt Jarvis, and thank you all for listening, and until we meet again, have a lovely day.
Bye.
Bye.